What's up everyone, my name is David Arroyo, and in this video we're going to be talking about using render passes within Blender in order to use them to our benefit and use them within comic book production. So render passes can really speed up your work process, and so in this video I'm going to try and show you exactly how we can do that. So let's jump right in and have a look at how we can create the following images. Okay, so the very first image you're looking at is a render straight out of Blender that I turned into this within Photoshop thanks to render passes that came straight out of Blender, which allowed me to do stuff like this, flatting, and not only that, but the most important part, I ended up with line art, and that is amazing. Imagine you had to do this traditionally, it'd take you decades. For the second image, it's quite similar actually. So again, something out of Blender that I turned into Photoshop thanks to render passes, and you can even do really cool line art just like this. Let's have a look at a demo first to see how it all was done. All right, so here we go. We have opened up Blender 2.93. Doesn't matter really what version you have at the moment, at least not for this demo. So I'm quickly going to show you first the basics, okay, so the theory on how this works, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so the very first thing I need is I will need a object like this one that is divided. Let me quickly move it up. So there we go. And I'm going to divide that. I'm going to Control R to create some loops. Then I'm going to press enter. That's fine. I can work with that. I'm going to very quickly, you don't have to or you can build along if you want. It's just to create a little bit of detail. That's all I need, just a tiny little bit of detail, so I can use some basic lighting and stuff like that. Right, so I'm going to go to my camera view. I'm quickly going to zoom this in a little bit so that it's a little bit more visible. Going to view, camera to view. If you don't know how to do all this, what I'm doing, I have a few videos on Blender and how to do these things. That explains how this works, so you can view the tutorial. I'll add the link in the descriptions below. Right, let me quickly turn on the lights. And there you go. That's what we have right now, which is exactly what I want. Should I maybe turn it around? No, that'll do for now. Let me quickly get out of camera view. Let's see. Up. There you go. Yeah, I was in the wrong thingy. Let's go back to here. There we go. All right. So I'm going to change a few things which are important. I'm going to my shadows. I'm going to increase them considerably to get at least some decent looking shadows. High bit. Let me quickly change this to a nice angle. I think this angle could work, or maybe, yeah, maybe this. All right, we'll work with this. And I'm quickly going to, wait, let's zoom this in again to make the camera a little bit bigger. There you go. Then it's all a little bit easier to see. Right. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start assigning a few, so in shading mode, let's quickly go to shading, just a few colors, just to prove my point, right? So in shading, where was I? Here we go. All right, I'll just put it like this so it's easier to see. In here, in shading, let's go to shading, and we're going to very quickly assign, let's change the color of this. No, let's leave the main material in white. That's fine. Let's create a new one. Let's call it color 1 or something. Color 01. Right, doesn't matter what color, you just choose one to your liking. And let's assign it to this part so that we have that. Then let's do the same on this side. Maybe also assign the color there. And assign the color here. Maybe we could do even like a thingy like this. Let me see what that looks like in camera mode, because that's what we're going to render out. Assign and assign. Oops. Let's assign this and assign this here as well. Right, so let's do that. Why is it not assigned? Of course, it needs to assign that color. Right, and on this side, maybe we can just select all this stuff, create a new one, new color, call it color 2, color 02. Really quickly add a color, doesn't matter which one. There we go, red, assign, and then let's assign another color at the top. Let's change this one to a yellow or something, or a green, maybe a green. There you go. Okay, so we've got 3 colors right here with some shadows, right? So that's what we got. What I want to do now, let's see, is this nicely framed? I think so. Can live with that, maybe move it a tiny little bit this way. Right, what I want to do now is I want to render this out, right? Now, what you have in Eevee as in Cycles, you have render passes, right? So you can go here to the render passes, and right now when we do a render, right, so you can do that here or press F12. When you do a render, this is basically what you're going to see, right? And you've got your combined and your depth, right? That's what I got right here. So what we want to do is just add a few additional passes. And because we're talking about comics, right, we could add a freestyle, which is here in your render properties. You go to freestyle, turn it on. This is fine. I'm not going to do anything too fancy with freestyle, but I'm going to just turn it on so that at least you have some lines. Basically what that means is that when you render it, right, it's going to show you these black outlines as if it was in a comic. Right, then what we can do is just, the most important ones are your diffuse, so your color. You can add some light and, you know, if you want, well, we have no emission, no environment. Shadow we can do. Ambient occlusion we don't really, well, we could. Did we turn it on here? Ambient occlusion, let's turn it on so that we can have some. Yeah, that works fine. What else I can do before I change? I quickly go to my light. And let me get out of here. Select my light. There you go. And in shadows, let's give it some context shadows as well, right, so that we have that at least. Right, so it's a very simple thing. This you can do in your own home. It's very easy to reproduce what I'm doing here. And let's not forget in freestyle, right, so we go down to freestyle, we're in the render passes. We go down to freestyle and we click as render pass. Okay, very important. Right, so now with this done, let's render this again. If you're wondering why I keep pressing that instead of F12, it's simply because I don't have an F12 on my MacBook Pro. So I need to change the shortcut key. Now what we're going to see here is a whole bunch of different passes, right? So for example, our diffuse color, yeah, that's interesting because now we have just our colors on the diffuse, right? And another thing, before I forget, let's go down to color management. So this is also in render properties. We go down to color management and you can change it from filmic to standard and you'll get more of the actual colors like within comics, right? Because filmic, it gives us, it's great for 3D rendering and for 3D in general, but for comics it creates, yeah, just desaturated colors which don't really always work. So what do we got? We have the combined, which is what we rendered out. The depth, we don't really have that much depth. Ambient occlusion, it's something super simple, as you've noticed. We have a shadow pass, okay, which is this one. We have a diffuse direct, which is kind of like your lighting. These are your colors. Your glossy direct, you could use it because the material has a little bit of gloss to it. Color, it doesn't really matter, but it's good to use this as a mask. And a volume direct we don't really have, and freestyle we have here, right here, quite useful, right, which is our lines. Now the idea is to render all this out, or to get this out, right? The fastest and easiest way, if you're lucky you're on a PC, and then you can get this EXR-IO add-on. I'll add the link in the descriptions below. And then you can, basically, when you do a save as, you do open EXR multi-layer, right? You bring it out like this, bring it to desktop, and somewhere, I'm doing demo here, so I'll just do it here. And let's make a quick folder. So I right click, demo, and then you can just give it a name and export it. But it's important that it's multi-layered. Okay, multi-layer. Now the big problem is that Photoshop doesn't open it by default, so you're gonna have to download a add-on. And like I said, I'll have a link to that add-on in the descriptions below, so you can check it out. So, but if you're on a PC, you can do this, or if you're on a Mac and you use Affinity, instead of Photoshop, Affinity can read it. So that's also very good news. Get yourself Affinity; it's really good, and it's an amazing alternative to Photoshop. Right. So that's what you do, and then all these layers are going to be exported, right? Which is amazing. But if you don't have that, then you're going to have to export them one at a time, right? So then you just go to Image, you do Save As, and you give them a name, right? So for example, this one is a combined. I'll quickly combined, like so. Now, maybe if you're watching this video somewhere in the future, then maybe Photoshop finally decided to add this feature of the EXR files. Would be great. Because it's actually a very simple thing. So I'm surprised that they haven't added it yet. Right, ambient occlusion, save the image. Let's do the next one. Shadow pass, save the image. So I'm doing this separately, right? So it takes time, unfortunately. This you lose a little bit of time doing this. Shadows, let's add that. There we go. Then the next one, yeah, this for me is kind of like the lighting layer, right? So let's quickly lighting, there we go. Let's save the file. Then this one is also very important, and I'll show you that in a second why. This one we're going to do last. This is going to be our flats. Okay, like for those of you that do comics, you will definitely know the flatting process, and you will know that flats are not supposed to have anti-aliasing. So that there is anti-aliasing here for sure. Look, if I were to zoom in, you'll definitely see it. Okay, and that's not what we want. So I'll get back to that in a second. First, let's deal with this, the following image. So let's go past this one. Then we go to gloss direct, could be useful, right? Save as, just call it gloss dir, save that as well. I save them as PNGs. You can save it as something else, but it is something quite useful. In this case, I can use this one just as a alpha, which is also quite useful. Alpha channel, save as image, and this one does nothing. And of course our freestyle, we need this one as a line art. Okay, this one is really important. Line art. Reason why this is important, so this means RGBA, the A stands for alpha, so if you do this it won't have any alpha. So especially for the freestyle line render, you need the alpha. Right, let's save the image. And we have done everything we needed here. So now we're going to go into Photoshop. Let's do that now. So there we go. And we are going to, this is a demo I'll show you in a second. First, we are going to go to File, Scripts, and we are going to load files into Stack. Right, so we're going to open a new, let's see, right here, bring it over here. It was on my different screen. I'm just going to use a folder, well no, actually files, because there's also a EXR. Right, so let's go to the demo, and here everything except for the EXR. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to open, and I'm going to There you go. So it's going to create a new file, a new Photoshop file, and it's going to bring all these images, okay, into a layer stack basically, which saves a lot of time instead of you constantly having to do it. So I'm going to do Control-0 to frame everything. Going to take this out of the picture, and I'm going to start with my line art, right? So I've got my line art, which should be all the way to top. And oh, before I forgot, yes, I forgot something. Let's go back to Blender. We needed the flats, right? So in order to do the flats, because we want no anti-aliasing, what you do, you go to your render, your sampling, bring your sampling all the way to 1. Okay, that's the lowest possible. And now do another render, F12, right? Go super fast. These renders go very fast. Now you go to your diffuse color, and now you will have anti-aliasing on here, you will see. Right, let's save as. Let's call these our flats. Now the reason why in comics, at least comics with line art, the flats are like this is they're hidden behind the line art, so then it's not really that big of an issue. So here let's quickly just import it, open, let's take it from the demo. Our flats are right here. Let's open, there we go. Let's bring it in, up. Let's quickly place it. There we go. And let's put it under the line art, right? So we've got our flats right now. And let's see. Layer. I should have maybe added a line here because now it's showing. But you can fix that in freestyle. We're not going to do that now because we'll lose more time, but just so that you know, because flats just like this, they look horrible. But we can always fix a lot of that on top of it. The important thing about the flats is that you can select them, right? So with the magic wand tool and your tolerance to 0, your flats, you can easily remove everything and the selections will be perfect. This is very important, right? So here you will see that there is no aliasing here whatsoever, anti-aliasing. It's just all very like pixelated. That's exactly what you want for flats. Okay, this one we don't need. So we've got our line art, and the good thing about flats is that we can select them very easily, so we can change all these aspects, right? Like when we do it normally. So we select it, Control U, and then we can change the color on the go. Okay, very useful within comics. And it will, like I say, the selection will stay perfect. You will not lose any detail or anything. It will not destroy your work. But it's important to do it on a sample of 1, not 64. Right, so once we got our flats, we can start working with the lighting, right? So we can bring in the lighting, we put that on top, we turn it on. Remember, we can always select our flats to remind Photoshop to invert the selection and take out this, for example. Well, in this case, it wasn't really necessary because I was going to, Control D. And I can now use a multiply, for example, right? Very simple, right? So now in comics, very often also I tend to say that we want to change the color of our shadows, right? Shadows don't tend to be black or just pure gray, right? In comics, we tend to, well, also in concept art, just in general when we're painting, we tend to change it to some type of blue. So even that you can do, Control B, right? And add a little bit of color to your shadows, right? You can choose to make it a little bit of blue or a little bit of that. You can choose. It doesn't, I mean, you can make them warm shadows too and go in towards the red. It's purely up to you. But it gives your work a little bit more character when you do that, right? So if you want, we can go a little bit more towards the warm side and we do shadows like this. And when we go to multiply, right, it will give that, right? You can, at any point in time, you can change it and say, no, I want my shadows to be a little bit colder. Bring them down to the other side. When you put it back to normal, that's what they are now, right? I'll leave it at multiply, like shadows tend to be. Okay, I know it's called lighting, but actually should be called shadows or something of the like, right? And you can always lower the opacity to get what you're looking for specifically. You got your ambient occlusion, which we could put on top of that. and also multiply that, right? So that we have this. And of course, again, I will select my flats, invert the selection, and just get rid of the background, right? The black, we don't need it. Then the alpha is useful, that we could use. The combine is useful just to see what you had before. So this was your render, and this is what you got here. Your glossy direct could be useful. Let's have a quick look. If we put it to, let's see, lighten, so you can play around until you find something that you like that could work. Obviously with glossy, you're not going to go to dark things, right? So you could maybe go for a color dodge, lighten color dodge, or any of these things, because it's gloss. So and you can always see if it makes any difference or not. At this moment in time, it doesn't really seem to, actually. Not with this mode, at least. Let's invert again. Also, before you do think it or mention it in your head, yeah, of course I could use clipping masks or just masks in general instead of constantly doing this. Because I could just put one of these on a thingy, and then, for example, here, if I were to clip everything on a clipping mask, then I wouldn't have to constantly work with all these things that I'm doing now. Let's add the shadows, and here as well. Here you can choose what to do, because the shadows came out a little bit funky, if you ask me, and a little bit weird. But the shadow layer does tend to be quite useful. I do use it quite a lot, actually, and you know, it's quite useful because it creates this additional detail, right, that wasn't there before. Right, it makes the shadows a little bit harder, and then we can now just add a background to our liking. Right, we can just type background and just anything, for example this, right? And then you've got your basic setup for a comic, which most importantly you can change the colors, which is exactly the reason of this demo, so that you can see how to quickly modify on the go, which is what we tend to do when we're working in comics, right? See, no matter what is going on, I can very quickly, thanks to my render passes, change all this stuff on the fly, right? And work with it, and you know, as I go, right? So with that said, that's the theory behind all this, right? That's why you want to use render passes, because they give you a lot of control. They give you a lot of control. They get everything here that you've got here. You can change it, you can modify it, you can take out the ambient occlusion if you're like, no, I don't need it. It makes it look a little bit like not real or this, that. That's the basics, okay? Once you understand this, what I just showed you, then you can move on to something like this, okay? And here I'll quickly show you, it's also a file in Blender. Let me quickly go here. We don't need to, what was this one? The testing platform number 2. Don't save. Right, this is the file. If I turn it on with lighting, it's basically like a cowboy saloon. And I quickly set up a few things. I've only put some colors where I need it for the camera. Once I leave the camera, you'll notice that there are parts, whoops, that are not, you know, they don't have color and such. So that's that. But for now, let's just know that this is here. The exact same process. I'm also using Eevee, not cycles. Could have used cycles, but in this case, Eevee was just fine. And let's see with this one, let's get back to Photoshop. Photoshop right here. Right, so here what I did, same principle. Let me turn all these off. Let me turn off the backgrounds and this and that, and let me turn off the dialogue, right? Let's start with simple line art. Okay, so line art is the one that came in. I think it was it this one? Yeah. So I started off with the line art, came in, and then from there on, just like with normal procedure, okay, start with your flats, right? Now imagine you had to do this without 3D, right? Imagine you had to draw this. There are a lot of lines in here, right? This would take you a while. So it's just important. So this is the original colors that came out of Blender. I modified them to this because they work better with the other layers, right? But once I had this, I started working with, let's see, which one did I do? I think I used the, yeah, this one first. the diffuse direct, then I added some gloss to it, I think, glossy color, and these are, you know, a hard light, for example. Here I have a linear dodge. Some have different opacity as well, right? But all this thanks to render layers, or render passes, as I should say. This one, shadows, very important. And one thing I changed was the line art. I made the line art also visible here, right? Very important. That helps so much because it lets the negatives go through on this side, right? What else did I do? Ambient occlusion, some ambient occlusion here. What else? The environment I didn't use at the end of the day. I used the background, right? The background, I just quick gradient for the background, added some clouds, and let's see, the environment, I think it was nothing. No, I did not use that at the end. And then a color overlay, which I did use to give it a little bit more of that comic feel, and then obviously the dialogue. And there you go. You know, the color overlay was just done in Photoshop. It was a simple overlay, 65%. And you just need to know which settings to use, right? Like for lighting, you will use, things that are going to be darker, you use multiply. Things that you want to lighten, you're going to use these ones, right? Like the light and screen and so forth. And that's it. And here you have another example of how you can use Blender render passes to speed up your work, right? When you have scenes or pages where there's a lot of detail in the background and you've got a lot going on, well, this is how you can do it, and you can save a tremendous amount of time, right? Now, I have another demo for you, because before you start thinking about it, yes, you can also do this with textures, right? You don't only have to use colors like what we did in the first demo, right, where you're just assigning materials. You can also do this with textures, and that brings us to the next example right here, right? So this was also created in Blender. Actually, the original render is this, right? It's a project that I'm currently working on. I'm not gonna talk too much about it because I can't actually, but it's something really cool in Unreal and very fun stuff, right? So so what I wanted to do is, I thought, well, I can take a scene of here and turn it into a comic book kind of feel, right? Which is what I did right here. I'll quickly show the Blender file so that you can also see that. There we go. Right, let's turn it all on. So within Blender, there you go. Within Blender, it just looks quite simple, right? It's a nice shot, and you've got all these, you know, these F-35s. They've got texture on them, as you can see. Nothing too fancy, just simple textures. HDRI map for the background to make it look really cool. And then just frame it really nicely, right? And then set it up with, I think, what did I have here? I had freestyle. I put the line thickness to 3 because I did a modifier on the, yes, here we go. I did a modifier on the freestyle. So when you go to freestyle line, I did a modifier, added one on thickness, right? So I went to the freestyle line style thickness, then I added a modifier, the along stroke, and made it a curve so that it is thin. I mean, the lines are thin at the beginning and then get thicker towards the middle and then thinner towards the end. And then a distance from camera as well, so that the lines that are closer to you are thicker and the lines that are further away from you, they get thinner. I am not going to do a tutorial about that right now, but you can do really cool stuff with these modifiers. Right, with that done, same thing. I did all the same stuff. I took out, let's see what I did. Let's see, flares, let's remove everything, and let's take out the dialogue. I started with the line art, right? So this is the line art from the airplanes, and very simple, nothing too crazy or too fancy. I added I think here I didn't even do flats because it's not really necessary. I could have, basically, but wasn't really necessary. See, this could have worked as a flat, just this one. Could have easily worked as a flat. I mean, it has a transparency on it, as you can see, but it could have worked as a flat. Actually, I think, yes, I do have flats, actually, funny enough, but I don't think I used them at the end. Right, so what I did do, right, I added a background myself. I added that in Photoshop instead of using the HDRI. I used this one. I started with the glossy direct, which is the image, but then with the Control L for levels, let's see, where is it here? Is it opening up? Well, if it is, I don't know where, but normally Control L does that. For some reason, it's not showing right now. Maybe somewhere here. Is it hidden? No. Oh, it's because... No. Okay, let's just keep going, right? Not here, it was here, it was here, and then... There we go. Yes, I modified the levels a little bit. They're already modified now because it was darker when it came in. Then I added some shadows, right? To add that cool look with shadows. Ambient occlusion. I think I turned that on, I'm not sure. Towards the end. Possibly. Added some flares, right? That was drawn by hand. And the flats, I don't know. I don't think I used the flats. Then added some clouds. And that's it. If I were to quickly go back to the file. Yeah, I added all that. So again, these are just render passes that you take out, right? The glossy direct, the shadows, the ambient occlusion, line art, flares I did hand drawing here in Photoshop, and the dialogue I typed it in myself and added a thingy. And like this, you can create really cool 3D shots that look amazing, right? I mean, they look amazing within comics and they have that comic book feel, right? Because you have so much control. You can, I mean, if you want to go all out and make it really dark, you can do that, right? You have so much control, right? You can make it look a little bit more dramatic, like what we did here. That's the cool thing about this. I really like that you have so much control and non-destructive workflow, right? So there you go. That's what I wanted to show you and how you can use render passes within Blender to make really, really cool comics and speed up your workflow a whole lot more with colors, because we all know flatting takes a lot of time. Coloring takes a lot of time, and 3D can help you so much. Within Blender, you can do so much tests. You can play with the lights, you can try things out until you're like, okay, that's the shot that I want, right? And the same goes for this one, and all based on this very simple theory that you just saw right here. So there you go. And there you go, everyone. I hope that you liked the demo. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that it inspires you to do something of your own. So as usual, you can always leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.